Hello dear learners, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, as you must have already seen the title, we are going to learn about static, the static keyword. Now the static keyword can be used in different ways, so we will be seeing all these various ways in which you can use a static keyword in your code. So let's get started. So the static keyword can be used in different ways. As I mentioned earlier, it can be used as a variable, it can be used as a method, it can be used as a block, it can be used as an import, and it can be used as a class. What do I mean by this? So you can have a static variable in your class, you can have a static method, you can have a static block, you can import static, and you can have a static class. Now this part, the static class, is not something that we'll be covering today in this particular video. There will be a future video wherein we'll be talking about inner classes, and in that particular video we will be talking about what a static class is all about. So today our primary focus is going to be on static variables, methods, static block, and static import. So let's start with the static variable first and see how it is implemented. So here in my Eclipse I have already created this particular class, a static test class, and I already have my shape project, if you remember from beginning, wherein there is a class called a circle class. In case if you have not seen how this particular whole project is recreated, you can check my previous videos on various different topics wherein you will find this particular project of how this is created, how the various variables and etc. is created. So you can check out all my previous videos which cover the various topics of Java. So here you can see I already have a double radius variable. Now such variables are called as instance variables, which are non-static variables. So this is nothing but an instance variable. What we will be creating here is we will be creating a static variable. Now for creating a static variable, you need something that is a static keyword. Now static is also known as a non-modifier or a non-access modifier. There is also something which is called as a access modifier. So there are two things, access modifiers and non-access modifiers. If you are interested in learning what access modifiers are, I'll share a link here on the top, so you can go and check my video on what are access modifiers, how to use them in your code, and how do they affect the accessibility of various variables in your class. Okay, so you can check that out here. Also, I'll share it in the link in the description box, so that you can even access it from there, or you can even check out the video from there if you're interested. So for creating static variables, you need to say static, the data type, let's say I'm saying int, and I'll say count. Now counts is something which is like the most common usage of static variables in your code. So you can say static int, count is how I'm using it. So static is the keyword, int is the data type, and count is the variable name. What I plan to do here is that every time a circle object is created, either using a blank or an empty constructor or using a constructor with radius, I am going to increase the count by 1. So I'll say count plus plus, and here also I'll say count plus plus. Okay, so this will every time increment the count whenever a circle object is created. So let's go to the static test class and try to create an object of the circle class. So first I'll create circle C1 is equals to new circle. This will be my first object, which does not have the arguments. Let's import because static, this particular circle class is not in the same package. And I'll say circle C2 is equals to new circle, and I'll pass 10 here. Okay, so I'm creating two objects here. Now if I go ahead and I try to get the count, so let me just simply, now as you can see here, my count variable is not private. So here what I'll have to do is I'll have to make a getter here so that I can get a count. So what I'll do here is I can either right click in my code and I can say source, and for the timing I'm just getting a getter. So I'll say select getters and I'll say generate. So this particular get count method will give us the count, and you can see, notice here that the get count method is a static method because our count variable itself is static. So the method to access static variables need to be static. So here when I come, I can say sysout, and I can say number of circle objects created, and I can say colon, and I can say plus, and I can say circle dot get count. So here if you see, it will help us to see the count. So here it should show us 2. So if you run this particular code, it is saying number of circle objects created is 2. So as you can see here, the count variable is been incremented both the times, as it is always said that static variables are static variables are shared variables. They are shared among all the objects. So every time the object is created, it is going to increment the count. So it is not per object like the instance variables. It is shared among all the variables. So it is shared variable. Okay, as I said. Okay, so this is where I am showing you. So as you can see here that the count is incremented every time the object is created, and the number is, so every object that gets created is affecting the same variable. So that's how it is. Now, as I said earlier, that when you're creating a static method, okay, rather a static variable, to access a static variable, you need a static method. But then that's not compulsory. You can have a normal method also, and you can access a static variable inside it. So you can see here also this is not giving me any error, and here, but yes, definitely for calling it you will need an object. So you can say c1 dot get count. Still, as I said earlier, since this is a static variable, this is going to get called. It is still going to show us 2 only when we run this particular code. You can see it is still showing 2. So irrespective of whichever object you call it, c1 or c2, it is always going to give you 2 as an answer here, because there are 2. It has been incremented twice, so it will always give you 2 as an answer. So that's what static variables, irrespective of whether you call it with a class name, whether you call it with objects, it is going to be the same always, because get count is non-static. You need an object to call it. Okay, so that is going to be there. But one important thing is, let's say if this is a static method, okay, still you can go ahead and call it with the object, although it will run with a warning, but then still this is the non-static way of calling it. You can also call it through the class. So calling it through class is the better approach, but this also will work. It is not going to throw you an error. Of course, it's giving you a warning, but it will still work. So this is how static variables are used. Again, let's go ahead and talk about the next thing. What was the next thing? The next thing was static methods. So let's as you can see here, I already have a static method here, get count. So for creating a static method, what you need to remember is that, again, like variables, you need a static keyword here, a return type, and the method name. Now return type could be a primitive type, it could be a even a reference type, like let's say a circle itself. I can have a method here itself that says get circle, and it returns as a static object of the circle class. So I can have a method here, I can say public static, okay, and I can say circle, and I can say get circle here, and this particular method can return as the object of the circle class. So it can take the radius as an input, so it can take int radius, or rather we can just outright say circle, whatever radius that it passes for int radius, and we can say circle c is equals to new circle, and I can pass the radius here, and I can say return c. So something like this can also be done. So it returns as a circle object here, which we can use in our code. So these are two static methods. As I said, you need a public, whatever, a modifier, public, protected, whatever modifier that you want to use. Default also maybe. Static keyword, which is a non-modifier, as I've already mentioned. The return type, as I said, it could be some primitive like this, or it could be some reference type like this, and the method name and arguments if any. So these are some two samples that you can see here of a static method. Important points that one needs to know about static methods is as I can show you here, that one thing, a very important point, is that non-static members. Now when I say members, it includes variables and methods both. Okay, so non-static members cannot be accessed or used inside a static method. Similarly, static members can be used or accessed in both static and non-static methods. So as I had shown you earlier, when this method was non-static, even at that time, I was able to use count. So a static variable, as you can see here, can be used inside a static or a non-static variable. Similarly, I can directly go and call I can say circle dot get circle. So you can see the static method is directly I'm able to call it here. Okay. So since this particular method is a static method, I am of course able to call the another static method here. I can use it here. Okay. So as I said here that both static and non-static members. So I can even say here some other variable. Maybe I can even say count equals to maybe something, or I can store it. I can access radius also here. So you can see radius is accessible here. So non-static, or rather instance variable, and static variables both are accessible inside a non-static method. But if you try accessing this here, if you say this dot radius, okay, I'm saying this because I want to refer to the instance variable. If I say is equals to 10 here, in that case you can see it is this itself is giving me an error. Okay, so that is not allowed. Let's say even if I don't have this particular variable here and I try to set the radius here, you can see it is giving me an error. So it can, as you can see, the error cannot make static reference to non-static field radius. So as I said earlier here in the point that non-static members cannot be accessed or used inside the static method. So you can see this radius is trying to refer to the instance variable radius. Because the method is static, it is throwing us an error. But here in the non-static method, I am able to access both. So this is what the two rules say here, that non-static members cannot be accessed inside static method, whereas static members can be accessed in both static and non-static methods, or vice versa also. For the non-static method, you can access both instance and static variables, whereas for the static method you can access only static variables. So let's again change this to what it was and remove this. Okay, so that's there. So as you can see, this is how you can create a static method. Again, as I have been reiterating here, that non-static variables cannot be used. Similar is the case here. Let's say if I create a variable here, I say int num equals to 10. Now this is what? This is an instance variable, right? If I want to access this directly here, even though it is declared in the same class, I will not be allowed to. I will not be. If I try to say sysout and I say num, this will throw an error. Why is it throwing an error? Again, because static, main is a static method. So even though it's a most important method or the starting method, since it's a static method, you cannot access non-static variables. You can see the error is still the same. Cannot make static references to non-static. So you cannot directly access them here. So this is again one more example wherein it shows that you cannot access non-static. So here again, rather than saying new circle directly, what we can let's try and call the get circle method. Again, directly you will not be able to call. So what you will have to do is you will have to say circle dot get circle, and you can pass the radius. Let's say I'm passing 15 here, and for the next one I can pass 10. So this is again, as I have always been saying, that getter methods, setter methods make it more secured to access the variables. So you can do it like this. Again, right now also if you try to run this, it is going to show you the same count too, because ultimately it is going and calling the circle constructor. So it will increment twice. So this is how you can access static methods. Going further, we have the static block. Again, static block is something which is not recommended to be used much, but yes, if it's a requirement, you can use it in your code. So let's see an example of how to create static block. So for that, what I'll do is I'll create one more variable here. So I'll say public. I'm making it public for a purpose. I'll let you know in some time. So we'll say public static, and I'll say string, and I'll say color. Okay. And for creating a static block, again, the syntax is you use a static keyword and you use an opening closing bracket. Now understand, static block is going to be something that will run at the very beginning of the program. So the moment you access a particular class, in the very beginning the static block runs. So what I'll do here is I'll say color equals to red. Okay, now this is initializing it to red. When I try to access this, you can see here, even before creating any object, even if I say circle dot color, let me try to print this. Let me say sys out, and I can say circle dot color. So you can put a semicolon here. So you can see it is accessible because I've made it public here. So that's the reason why I made it public. So you can say circle dot color, and if you run this, you can see it is showing us red. In the very beginning, it is showing us red. So even before the objects are created, you can access it. So primary use of a static block is when you want to initialize any static member. Now when I say static member, again I mean you can even go ahead and call some static method. So I can call even get count here. In the beginning I can see the count. Okay, so I can call the get count method and it can print the value for us. So okay, just a moment, let me make it static again. Static get count method is not static. So I'll say static get count. It will return us the count and we can show the count. So I can even print the count here. I can say sys out and I can say initial count, because this is going to come in the very beginning. So I can say initial count, get count, and I can print this. So anything that you want to initialize in the beginning, or you want some method to get called in the very beginning of your code, is what you can write inside a static block. Again, static blocks are expensive in terms of the requirements, memory requirements and efforts that the processor takes. So it is ideally not recommended to use a static block. Only you can use it only if it is really mandatory, that some static variables you want to initialize in the beginning, you can go ahead and use it. Let's try to run this again and see how it behaves. So here of course it is going to print the value of circle, and internally it will also call, you can see here it shows initial count as 0, because that's the static block is going to run first. So that is why it is showing initial count equals to 0 first. Then it is showing us red, and then it is creating the two objects and showing us the count. So as I said, this is going to be something that will run in the very beginning. So something that you want to do in the very beginning, you can do it through static. Again, one more usage of static is that something that does not need instance variables. Like generally when we have utility classes, we don't need to store any state of those particular classes. That is where static is primarily used, when you don't want to store the state of a particular object. So utility class is like the best you can say use case for static. So that is where you can use it the most. So this is how you use a static block. It starts with the static keyword, opening closing curly bracket, and you can initialize the variables here, or you can even call some methods that you want to be implemented here. So that can be done in the static block. This is something that runs in the very beginning of the code, as I said earlier. Okay, what we have next is the static imports. Now this is something that very few people are aware of. So let's see what exactly is static import. Although it says static import, when you have to use it in your code. So let's say I have a static variable here, color. So if I don't want to keep saying this like this circle dot color and want to use it as a local variable, what I can say here is I can say import, then I can say static, and I can say com dot learning dot shapes dot circle dot I can say color. So I can say something like this. Again, remember, only public members can be called here, of course, because it is outside the package. So when you're importing, it has to be a public. Now after that, I can just simply say color here. I don't need to say circle dot color every time. So I can use it as a local variable. So import it once, and then you can use it as many times as you want. So the behavior is going to be same. This is usually used for calling static members or importing static members here in your code, so that all this reference is not required. You can simply just call the variable and use it as a local variable. That is basically import a static or static imports. You can import other members also. Whatever public members that you have in your class, you can So not just variables, as I said, members. So when I again always every time I say members, I am always talking about variables and methods. So I can also go and say import static, and let me just copy this much, and I can say circle dot, and I can say, let's say, get circle. So I don't need to every time keep saying circle dot get circle, circle dot get circle. Okay, I can outright just say get circle. I can use it as if it's a local method. So this simplifies it, the calling etc. simplifies with this. So you can import all the static members, rather to be precise, public static members of a particular class in case if you are in a different package. If you are in the same package, of course, all those modifiers, they apply their rules as they are. You can check out my video on modifiers. So that's there. So this is how import static or static imports work, wherein you can import all the public static members of a particular class in the another class and use them as if they are local. As you can see, color and get circle, both I have used here, which are my static members. Okay, so that's basically static imports. So this is how we see an example wherein we have covered all the various ways in which static can be used. As we have seen earlier, here we have static variables, static methods, we've seen static block, and we've also seen static inputs. As I said in the beginning, we are not covering static classes here. We will cover them in a future video when we talk about inner classes. So please don't forget to even watch that video wherein we'll be talking about inner classes and how a static class can be created inside an inner class. That is it for today. Please subscribe to my channel, like my videos if you like my content, share it with your friends, and keep supporting me in this particular initiative of my knowledge sharing. Thank you. Bye-bye.